Let's go.
Yeah, that's
Let's
great.
go. Yeah, good luck. Right. Hello. Good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Dig Hill 80 presentation of findings. Quickly, Peter Doyle, quickly, that way. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm not going to take up much of your time. My name's Al Murray. I'm a friend of Robin Schaefer's. I'm a patron of the Dig. That's right, isn't it? That's my function here. I visited the site myself in July on my way to Paris to make a comedy programme, which meant I wasn't really in the mood for laughs, having seen the site. It was an incredible thing to visit, an incredible thing to see, an arresting place, a fascinating project. And I think everyone here knows about this project. That's why you're here. In fact, what's brilliant about this is when you crowdfund something, you don't see the crowd. The crowd are out there on the internet, in the ether, somewhere, but here's the crowd. And so before we meet the people who are sat on the top of the rocket, you're the people who built this rocket, as it were. So I think you should give yourselves a round of applause for your involvement, yeah, and your support that you showed this. So go on. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Now, we also need to say hello to everyone on the live stream. Right? Yeah, so hello, the live stream, everyone. Hello, the live stream. Sat at home in your underpants. Yeah. Couldn't be bothered to turn out for the real thing. Yeah, good luck to you. Now, I'm here in my capacity as I'm sort of going to move this along, and we're going to hear tonight from Rob Schaefer, who's a German historian. So the Germans are here with us this evening. Well, that's right. We're all, come on. We're all friends now, and see how the evening goes. Peter Doyle joins us as well, ladies and gentlemen. You'll be aware of Peter's work. And Simon Vergem is here too, who you all know. Now, what I love about this project is after a weekend of commemoration, that for me scratched the surface of a lot of First World War stuff, or Great War stuff, however you prefer to call it. What this project did was it didn't scratch the surface, it peeled the onion. And layer after layer after layer after layer came off. And I was totally struck by how this place, an apparently mundane place on a hillside in an ordinary Flanders village, revealed its secrets. Shocking secrets that completely, for me, humanized the story of the First World War. I know a lot of people will have watched Peter Jackson's film last night, and seeing it come into colour and seeing the voices dubbed on did some of that. But visiting Hill 80, for me, completely humanized the idea of the Great War. And you'll see why as we reveal the findings, because I contain a couple of spoilers, although actually we haven't really talked about what the guys are going to do this evening, because I want to discover this stuff with you the same way you do tonight. But for me, I was really struck by visiting the site. Really humanized the First World War and the cost of the First World War for me in a brand new way, and a shocking way, and a very moving way. And I hope you enjoy this evening. Now, those of you who are expecting Dan Snow to be doing this talk, this bit, Dan unfortunately can't join us. His filming schedule meant that he's had to go off and film somewhere, which is frustrating, but is absolutely typical of television. I have a week where I may have a rehearsal tomorrow or not. I don't know. Right? It might be on Wednesday, it might be Thursday. It may have been today, and I didn't turn up because no one bothered to tell me. Right? So, in fact, I may not even be here. So, what we do have is we have a short film from Dan to say hello, and I think to say what he feels about the project. And we're going to run that video now, and then I'm going to tell you what the proceedings will be, and then we'll get on with it because time's tight. Thanks.
Hi there, everybody. I owe you all a massive apology. I'm afraid I am not going to be there with you tonight. I'm very, very embarrassed. I absolutely despise cancelling things, but I'm afraid I've had to cancel this one because the BBC scheduled at late notice my programme on shell shock for BBC Two at 9 o'clock tonight. So it's a direct clash. And after long and hard agonising, I decided I would spend the evening trying to drum up support, publicity, people to watch the darn thing. Having done all the hard work over the last year and a half, it feels wrong to abandon it on the night of its transmission. So I will tell you, everyone there knows, I'm sure, we have got no power over when the BBC chooses to broadcast our programmes. We're the whim of people called schedulers. And so I just apologise. It's very unprofessional of me. It's disrespectful to all the hard work and all the money that was raised by you all. And I'm very, very sorry indeed. But I know that you are in great hands. You've got the legendary Aaron Murray, who's much more interested than I am. And you've obviously got the Dig Hill 80 team, who are as inspiring a bunch of individuals as you will ever meet. What they've achieved at Dig Hill 80 has been a beacon to those of us who believe that the future of archaeology, the future of history, the future of all these things is crowdsourced. It's reaching out to true fans, people that really care about these things, bypassing the media, bypassing universities, bypassing grant-giving bodies, and just getting on and doing things ourselves. But we know there's enough of us out there. We're a community. We can get these things done. We don't need anyone's permission. We don't need to ask for anyone's money. So I'm so proud of what the Dig Hill 80 team have done. I'm very happy to have played a very small part in it. And again, very embarrassed that I'm not there tonight. But I hope that you won't hate me too much. Have a wonderful evening. What you're about to see, in terms of the objects, in terms of the updated historical record, is, well, literally groundbreaking. And thank you, above all, thank you. Without you, this would not have been possible.
Dan Snow, ladies and gentlemen. Right, so how we're going to run this evening is we're going to do basically a series of modules from Rob, Peter and Simon as they take you through the story of the site, what they found there, and we take a progress through the course of the war as well. So we're going to start. Well, basically, we'll look at the site. We'll look at the battle in 1914, the archaeology of 14 to 18, the battle in 1917, the battle in 1918, the finds, the soldiers' archaeology, and then the soldiers' stories, and a little bit more after that. But I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. So we will start now with Peter talking about site. Thanks, Peter.
Well, it's fantastic to see so many people here. I mean, without you, I know everybody's going to be saying this, but without you, we just would not have delivered this. So we're like a family, and it's a family that is actually studying the battlefield, a family that is engaging with the battlefield, and a family who has delivered the stories of the battlefield. I dedicate this to you, if I can get it to work. So, principle behind this is, how did we come about with this idea? Well, like all good ideas in Flanders, it's obviously born over beer. Well, not quite. What we can see here is Simon, in March 2017, engaged in a discussion about the possibilities of one site that he's had occasion to visit. A site which had intrigued him, a site which had lots to offer, and also lots, perhaps, of stories to be revealed. Now that site on a lonely hillside here in the village of Wytschaete, it's taken me a long time to work out to say that, led him to a site where the local people said, with all seriousness, there is a regiment buried here. And when Simon broke the ground in order to see for his own eyes what was present, he came across evidence of that regiment. Who were these people? Good question. Gonna have to help there, I'm afraid. Thank you. Keep going. Who were these people? Where did they come from? And why were they there? Well, as soon as Simon had broken the ground, what he was trying to do, of course, was to see what was possible, what was present. And what he found was the evidence of soldiers of long gone. Evidence of soldiers from two regiments, if you like, two nations. Thank you. Try this? All right. Now this location, this hill in Flanders of Wytschaete, once was a bucolic beauty, an area with a mill, a miller's cottage, and other buildings in that village. A peaceful village. A peaceful village where once there was a mill. Sorry about this. Now there was a fortress. So you're going to have to go back down. That fortress, can you operate it down, please? Thank you. And the next. That hillside had a fortress which was constructed, a fortress that was built on a hill slope that had reached the height of 80 meters. The hilltop, hill 80. And we can see built into that the remains of this village. Now the remains of the village consisted of trenches also, built into the soil of Flanders, the very soil, the rich soil, that would actually contain the trenches. There we are. Maintain the trenches of that soil. Sorry for this, ladies and gentlemen. Have you got the other clicker, please? Right. So preserved in the soil there would be the trenches, the very trenches which we would come to dig. Now, if you look at those trenches, what do we see? We see the construction of a fortress made from the characteristic trench lines of the First World War, dug deeply into the soil, a wound into that landscape. We can also see the remains of the village of Wytschaete with the church and also the mill itself. Thank you. We can see also the construction of the trenches and the building of those trenches, the construction into a fortress that would take a lot to attack, to gain access to. So the hillside, this is the hillside of Wytschaete from Wytschaete. We can see just how shell blasted that would be as the years have gone by. This was a site that was attacked by the Allies. Constantly, consistently, engaging with them, using a whole series of munitions. Now, since the days of the early days of the Battle of Ypres, we saw that the Germans had invested this, had gained and gathered that new ground, and ensured that they would dominate a ridgetop that would look down over the Allies and would ensure, again, that the Allies would be disadvantaged by the German troops that sat there. Now, as the First World War developed, it was a technological war, a war which saw the development of aircraft that flew over the lines daily, that took photographs, that was able to map out the trench lines. As we can see here, the trench line that would form what became known as the Ypres salient. A salient, a bulge in a line that surrounded the town of Ypres, and also pugnaciously spread out towards the Allied lines. We can see how the Germans were able to bombard into the city of Ypres and also to observe directly over the landscape, watching everything that the Allies would do. And at the heart of this was the fortress villages of Messines and of Wytschaete. These were pivotal to this fortress, and the Germans would hold this for 3 whole years. Why did they hold it? Well, they used the magnificence of their optical equipment. They could see almost into the bedrooms of the villages around, and also into the city of Ypres. They could pour shells down into that and observe every movement that went by. Now, the Allies, of course, were not going to allow this to happen, so this site, picked out in red, our very own Hill 80, the fortress village, would of course be the scene of multiple bombardments. The Germans who occupied this had to suffer this day after day, hour after hour. Shells rained down upon them. I pray the Lord will get me out of this out of this trench, said one German soldier. And anybody who's visited the site, as you all have, will remember these shells that vary in size from the immense to the small, each one of them fired at the German lines, each one of them intended to deal death and to destroy the fortress. And it's not surprising that in June 1917, we have something where it's been wiped from the face of the earth. Men moving through the remains of that village saw only the abomination of destruction, saw only the fragments of houses and the traces of roads. And so, as the years passed, we ended up with a field from which small numbers of bricks protruded, a scrubby field, a field over which Simon Verdigan walked, and the people told him, there is a regiment here. So who were these men? What was this regiment? Which nation did they come from? Why did they come here? They are the fallen. What is their story? We are here to tell this story. So thank you so much for being here with us, and thank you so much also for being part of Dig Hill 80. Thank you.
Okay, and now Rob is going to tell us about the battle in 1914. Robin Schaefer, ladies and gentlemen.
But someone needs to tell me how that works. There's nothing.
Swipe.
Yep, what? There's a black screen. But okay, I'll just start while Simon sorts that. When we set up this talk for this evening, I was told that I had 10 minutes to decide what to talk about when describing the battles of 1914, which came as a bit of a shock because, well, in Germany, when you're a historian, you are used to multi-volume letter-bound histories of everything. So I had to focus on something and decided to talk about the young Bavarian regiments which fought and took that village, in October 1914. So I wanted to look at who they were, because after all it was their legacy we uncovered, mainly during our dig on the Hill 80. On the night of All Saints' Day 1914, German regiments from Württemberg and Bavaria assembled south and east of the Messine Ridge in an attempt to wrest this hilltop, this strategically important piece of ground from the enemy. And Wytschaete was to be the designated target of the 6th Bavarian Reserve Division, a division which comprised of 3 reserve infantry regiments which were recruited and raised in the areas of Augsburg, Fürth, Passau, Freising, Munich, Landsberg, and other communities in Bavaria. Reserve regiments were only raised in wartime. Their ranks consisted of a skeleton of old regular non-commissioned officers and officers from active line regiments, a percentage of reservists of various age groups, while in August 1914 potential gaps, in the case of the 6th Bavarian Reserve Division about 2/3, were filled up with untrained Ersatz reservists and volunteers. And those men flocked to the colors for various reasons. Some reluctantly, having been involuntarily pulled away from their families and working life by the German conscription system, while others joined voluntarily, full of patriotic zeal, ideas, and just like men in Britain and France and elsewhere, they joined to defend their fatherland, just like war volunteer Franz Blumenfeld, who in 1914 wrote about his reasons to join up. Why did I volunteer? Certainly not because of any kind of enthusiasm for war, or because I think it's a major thing to shoot people, or to get a war decoration of some kind. The opposite is the case. War is a wicked thing, and I also think that by using more skillful diplomacy, it should have been possible to avoid it. But now that there is a war, It is quite natural that I unite my own personal destiny with that of the German people. And even though I'm sure that I would have been able to achieve better things for Volk and Vaterland in peacetime than in war, it feels wrong to undertake such calculating observations. It is like comparing one's own value with that of a drowning man to find out if he's worth saving. The regiments tasked with the capture of Wytschaete were, in their structure, social clubs. They consisted of men recruited in the German fashion locally around the garrison towns of their regiments, men who would in some cases have served together in peacetime for 10, 15 or more years, during their 2 years of conscript service, and possibly afterwards as reservists during monthly and later annual military exercises. Men of small villages, towns and city districts would form the personnel of certain companies within their home regiments. They would be related from the same families, there would be neighbors and acquaintances, teachers and pupils, men from all areas of working life and from all social classes. Merchants, farmers, craftsmen, civil servants. They were not poor conscripts as they are so often depicted in British literature. When they put on their field grey uniforms, they became citizen soldiers, proud men of Germany, in that case Bavaria, fighting for their König and Vaterland, for king and fatherland. Some of them were well trained, capable and determined. Others only had received 6 or less weeks of training, hardly enough to learn how to salute and to march or to move in formation. Yet the regiments they fought in were close-knit entities, the men being united in common social roots and beliefs. At Wytschaete, these men would have their baptism of fire. The attack route of the 17th Reserve Infantry Regiment followed the same path that many of you who served on the side or worked on the side as volunteers would have taken every morning when you approached Wytschaete from the south. They would have traversed the same dip in the ground, they would have seen the dark silhouette of the church behind this, and also the windmill on the horizon. What followed was slaughter, fighting of the most brutal and unforgiving kind. The British defenders turned every house and every farmstead into veritable fortresses and greeted those barbarians with a withering hail of fire. Each house had to be cleared in close combat, at the point of the bayonet, with the edge of a spade, with a rifle butt, with hands and even fists. A contemporary account tells us the church of Wytschaete was in flames, and the windmill in the northeast flared like a beacon in the darkness. Friend and foe lay wounded side by side among the smouldering ruins. In the light of the burning mill, normal people, those normal people, carpenters, cobblers, merchants, farmhands, artisans, craftsmen and academics turned into killers. Josef Merkel, a Gastwirt, a pub landlord, from Geltendorf, wrote afterwards, "The English had barricaded themselves into the houses. We tried to break into them and suffered terrible losses in the attempt. In the end, we barricaded the doors and set the buildings alight, roasting the defenders alive. An admittedly brutal but very effective solution. Cries for mercy we ignored. They were soon drowned out by the crackle of the flame and the crash of burning timbers." Merkel was killed on the 19th of July 1916 at Aubert in France. I felt something sharp and metallic pierce my thigh, so I threw my leg forward quickly so that it could not penetrate far. Then I turned around to face my opponent. He was a prone, wounded English soldier who was aiming his rifle at me. His tool of death flew into the mire, and I dispatched him to hell with one hard thrust. Then I pushed on. The man who wrote this gruesome account to his parents was Ludwig Engstler of the 4th Company, 17th Reserve Infantry, who in his civilian life had been a one-class primary school teacher from Ungarn. He had no prior military service and had joined as a war volunteer on 4th of August 1914. He would become one of the many casualties of the night's fighting, and he succumbed to his wound a couple of days later in the field hospital at Gardelieu. Both Engstler and Merkel have no known grave. Casualties on that first night, All Saints' Night, were enormous. The British had been pushed out, and Wytschaete had briefly been in Bavarian control, yet by the morning of 1st of November, in the face of a French counterattack, the village had to be given up again. Of the 2 attacking regiments, the 17th and the 21st Bavarian Infantry Regiments, it was the 17th which suffered the most. Of the 2,000 men deployed in the initial assault that night, 211 were killed, 506 were wounded, 141 were registered as missing, while a further 39 were taken prisoner by the French. A total of 897 men in a single night. The losses of the 21st Regiment equal to about 400 men. An enormous impact for the communities in Bavaria. In the fighting for and around Wytschaete, and further to the north, the regiment would lose a total of 2,078 men killed and wounded, up of a total strength of 3,000 men up until 25th of November 1914. After the publication of the first casualty lists in December 1914, Maria Thies von Freising, a primary school teacher, wrote, "Today I taught in a classroom devoid of children. So many fathers, uncles and brothers have been torn away from us. The whole community is in mourning. Among those lost are so many faces I have got to know and love. Anton Siegert, the father of Fritzl, has fallen. So have Josef Albrecht, the carpenter, Hugo Jörg, father of my little twins, and the father of Johann Zimmer. Oskar Sicker, the father of Johanna, is missing. Only God knows what has become of him. I have cried for our little Peter, who has not only lost his father, but also his elder brother and uncle. For what terrible times we live in, may God be with us all."
Thanks, Rob. Heavy stuff, that. Simon, the Archaeology of 1914 to 1918. Here he is.
Hi, good evening, everybody. First of all, I want to thank you all again, because without all of you, this wasn't possible. So I know it was said before and was saved a lot of times again, but thank you very much. So I'm going to talk a bit about the archaeology. It wasn't an easy task. I only have about 20 minutes. And we found a lot, so I had to make choices. So I'm going to stay quite general and just give an overview of what we found, and I'm going to try to do it a bit chronologically. But before we start into what we found during the excavation, I'll get into what we expected to find based on the trial trenching. So it was in 2015 when we went to the site because one of our clients came up to us and they wanted to construct a housing estate on the field. And what we always do when we go out is do a study with aerial photographs. I'm not going into the whole study here, but the grey lines that we see on this map is what we expected to find based on those aerials. So you see at the edges we have the fighting trenches, and we have that diagonal trench. That big grey thick line is a barbed wire trench. The barbed wire line, which we can't find because that's above ground. And then in the corner down my side here, we have the buildings from the miller's house and the miller's barn and stuff like that. The thin lines that are colored in are our trial trenches. We had to lay them out. Questioning the way we laid them out was questioned by the client. We had to evade the places in the houses, not to disturb the ground too much, which is now too big that we kind of dug everywhere, so that's no longer an issue. And if you look at the colors, the black color features are the bomb craters. And the green features are the trenches. So you can see that we had a few of the trenches that we expected to find based on the aerials, but we also had a few of the green dots in between. So we already expected after trial trenching that we would find more trenches than the aerial photographs told us. And then in the corner where the Miller's estate was, you can see the orange and the red. The orange is the debris layer that we found. So we found a lot of bricks and mixed all kinds of construction materials from those buildings. And the red lines are the remains of the houses, so the foundations that we found during the trial trenching. So for us it was already a good thing because we didn't expect to find the remains of the houses. Most of the time they were gone by ploughing and stuff. But apparently that field, the southern part, was never ploughed. So we had the foundations, and we were very happy to have the foundations, and we thought it was only going to be the foundations. But it turned out to be a bit more. Okay, so as I was already building up to it, what we found surpassed all our expectations. We knew, and that was the reason why we set up this project, that it was going to be a fantastic site, that we were going to find a lot, but it was a lot more than that. So this is the survey map of the excavation itself. All the khaki-colored features are the trenches, or bits and pieces of trenches. So you recognize those big fighting trenches in the corner, down in the edges. You see the big diagonal trench, and you see a few of the communication trenches down in the south, connecting the buildings with the village, the center of the village, which was at the south of our excavation site. And you can also see that we had a lot of walls, and within those walls we had cellars, which I will go to now. So this is a rough layout. Now try to run through the archaeology a bit chronologically now. So, as Peter told you, before the war there was a mill, there was a miller's site. This is the main center. So at the top we have the miller's house. Down in the left corner you have a barn, and then down here, just about below the excavator, there was a small building that we can't place yet because it's not visible on any of the photographs that we have from that period. And on this photo we have the steam mill. So to give you a bit of a more 3D model inside of the excavation, thanks to Todd and his team from Virginia Tech. So here you have a good view on the cellars of the barn, and the miller's house is down at the bottom. Okay, so this is the miller's house. We have 3 different rooms. At my side here, we have the doorstep, so that's the front door of the miller's house, with the original floor still remaining. And you can see the earth in the corner, which is a bomb crater that penetrated that floor. Top left corner is the middle room, which collapsed. So you can still see the original floor, but it collapsed. And I'll come back to that later, to the reason why it collapsed. And then bottom left is the stair that leads into the last room, which didn't we did preserve the floor, the original floor, because there was a cellar underneath it, and the cellar collapsed, the roof of the cellar, so we only had the cellar, but the preservation of the cellar was really good. And we found evidence that that cellar was used by French troops in the beginning, and then later by German troops. We are not at the point to be able to tell when it collapsed exactly. We're still looking into the finds, so we hope to be able to tell a bit more about that later. This is the barn. So we had a double arch cellar here again. Again, we only expected to find some of the foundations, but there was actually one big cellar and a second smaller cellar to the left of it. And then the third bigger construction that we had was the steam mill. So that building was situated directly next to the windmill, and within the building there was a big steam engine, so when there was no wind, there was a connection between the steam mill and the windmill with a big chain so that they could still operate in cases of winds still got it. So down here you can see the oven with the original door. There was a big chimney on top. I don't know if you recall the photo that Peter showed with the chimney behind the windmill. And I'll come back to that later as well. Bottom left corner you see the concrete slab that we talked about quite often during the excavation. That turned out to be just a base plate and nothing more. And you can also see just in front of those of that concrete slab the big grey stones which we used as a base for the steam engine. So that was the situation before the war. And then in 1914, as Rob told, the Bavarians were coming and they took the village. He had a nice in situ preservation of some Bavarian equipment. So we see Bavarian pickelhaube, Lederhelm. On the top we have a water bottle, canteen, and some ammo pouches. And there's a bayonet on the right. I think we have a second bayonet on the left as well. So again, a bit of an animation. So the big feature that we will fly over later in the middle. There you go. So that trench that you can see now is a 1914 trench. So that's a very shallow, quickly dug trench, dug by the Bavarians when they took the site and they had to defend against the counterattacks by the French that were coming from the north. So here you have another drone shot of that trench. It runs all the way up and will end up at the containers on the left. So the more we went up, the more shallow it was, so it was more difficult to follow. But here in the southern part you can see how shallow it was and how quickly it was dug. There was no revetment, there was no floorboarding. It was just a normal, easy dug ditch in the ground. You could even see on locations where they made it themselves easy. On the sandy bits it was deeper, and on the rocky bits they didn't go that deep because it was too hard to dig. So it's human, I think, to just it makes themselves. They make it themselves as easy as possible. Here you have again another view on the same kit that I showed in the first slide, and down in the back you can see some of the remains from one of the soldiers that we found. You can see his foot and his weapons that were lying with him, but I'll come back to that later as well. This is also an animation of that same trench. So you have the soldier here down, and then the kit on the top. Okay, then we come to 1915, 1917, which is the longest period for our site, which begins somewhere in the end of 1914, the winter of 1914, 1915, but the real construction starts somewhere in the early 1915, and it ends somewhere in 1917 when the preliminary bombardment starts with the June 1917 attack that will follow. The photo that you see is a part of one of the trenches that was, well, actually the trench that was parallel to the northern edge of our excavation site. So again, so the trench that we fly over now is the Wytschaete, which is more or less a communication trench, but built as a fighting trench, connected the first line on our side, the fighting trench, with the village. And the trench we're flying over now is Sachsengraben, which is the fighting trench on the northern edge of the slope. So here you have a few photos of those trenches. The two on the left is the Wytschaete. You can see the traverses down at the left corner. On the top left, you can see some of the floorboarding that remained. The advantage of the site was that it was very dry, the ground was very dry, so it was easy to dig in. We didn't have trouble with groundwater and stuff like that. The downside of that is that the preservation of the wood was not as good as you would go into the lower areas around the river itself. So as you can see, that stretch of trench was one of the only stretches that we found some of the wood that helped us to give an idea of how they constructed the trenches. The photo on the right is Sachsengraben, which is the fighting trench of north. As you can see, the wood didn't really preserve, but we did find the bottom layer, which was made out of bricks, the rubble that we found from the miller's house and the miller's buildings, and they used those bricks as some kind of drainage system. So as you can see, there's two lines of bricks with an opening in the middle, and if you put the floorboards over them, you have a drainage sewage channel in the middle. And an advantage of the bricks is that the water can also migrate through the bricks, so it's a good base, but it also makes it possible for the water to run through it. As you can see, down at the left, Schweinesteig. I found that photo by accident about a month ago. This is actually a stretch of the trench that we excavated. You can see a bit of the comparison with the trench on the left. The only difference is that the trench on the photo, the contemporary photo, is on the southern edge of the barn, whereas the excavated photo is on the northern edge. The one that we excavated on the southern edge, so the trench that you can see on the photo, wasn't in as good condition as this, but we can assume that the construction was the same. And if you look at the site, it was about here in this corner. So the wall that you see on the left is actually the wall of the miller's house, and the almost collapsed roof in front of what the trench is looking at is the barn at the north. So this is actually quite a good find and a good way to see how the trenches were constructed there. Next to the trenches, we also have a few of the fortifications. This is an example of a bunker that was built within one of the cellars. So they used the cellar itself and they built a bunker within it with the prefab concrete blocks. So as you can see on the left top photo, that's an overview drone shot, and the fighting trench actually passed it on the left. And so the actual connection was not in our site, so we couldn't excavate that, unfortunately. But we could see on the wearing out of the bricks on the floor where the actual passage was towards the trench. And then you can see that the bunker is built out of two separate rooms. A bigger room and then a small entrance room with a zigzag entrance so that we could not fire directly within or in the bunker. Another kind of dugout that we found is a wooden dugout that was on the other trench in the Sachsengraben, which was a bit of a coincidental find because we didn't expect to find it anymore. It was in the last week, the week before, and because it was collapsed, we couldn't immediately see it. Only by going deeper, we found the roof, and then after that, Mateusz cleaned it very nicely. And here you can see some of the sandbags that were still in there. You could even see the ropes that tied the sandbags together, and you can see the construction method that they used with the diagonal beams. This is a nice model that was made by Wrold. So you can see the stairs leading out towards the trench. Something happened. So then we move on to the battles of 1917 and 1918. I took those together because it's a bit difficult to make very clear difference between the two. As I shown on the early map, you have that diagonal trench that was made in 1917. That same trench was used in 1918 by the British to just turn it around. So So a lot of the British stuff was found within that German trench. So we really have to base ourselves on the clients that come from that location. So we should fly over it now. So there you go. It's all those cross sections on the left and the center. And here are a few examples. So we have that cross section on the left. Some of the floorboards preserved. And then the bottom left is a British conversion of the trench. So you see a British helmet and spade. And then I also added this photo because this is one of the stairs leading towards a tunnel. And we found two entrances to tunnels, but we couldn't go into the tunnels anymore. And that was one of the reasons why the middle floor of the miller's house was collapsed, because there was a tunnel constructed under it. I think I have one more model. So that's the stair that I just showed. We think the tunnel started underneath the original mill, and then you can see it fly towards the miller's house, and you can see the entrance leading towards that middle room after the collapsed. But we couldn't go any deeper there because there was that original barn. The barn is still there, and it already had cracks in the wall, so we couldn't risk to go any closer. This is one more model of that staircase. And this brings me to the end of 1918. We will now, I would say, so this is the general features of the archaeology. We will come back to the archaeology with some of the finds later and also with the sources. Thank you.
Right, battle in 1917. Thanks, Peter.
Okay, so there's one thing that we all know about the Battle of the Seas, and that is explosives like this were used. So the question is, what did we find at this site that told us about this battle, this pivotal battle in 1917? Well, before I go on to that, isn't it interesting you've seen all of those trenches that you personally have dug? I was there seeing you digging those trenches with your own hands. So it must be a journey back in time for you, and it's a journey back in time for us to try and understand what those trenches mean in terms of these battles. So 1917, we see the development of trench warfare attaining some aspect of its highest level. We also understand that the deadlock has been intense, creating a trench line which, as I've already mentioned, observed the British and the Allies in the lower ground. It was getting on their nerves day after day. Would you get shells firing down onto the men in the lower parts? But it took 2 years of planning to try and get rid of the Germans off the top of the ridge. This is obviously from the perspective of the Allies. And that comes from the eyes of this one gentleman, John Norton Griffiths. John Norton Griffiths, Mad Jack, Jack of Empire, a man who didn't stay still, a man who could take Kitchener on in his own manner, with flaring eyes and strident tones. What Norton Griffiths was a civil engineer, a guy that knew how to dig tunnels, and he thought, why don't we earthquake the ridge? Why don't we dig tunnels underneath this ridge, laying mines that would be used to explode the German trenches to Kingdom Come and their occupants? And so it fell to men like this man here on your right, a miner from rural England, a miner who brought his trade to this part of Flanders and who was able to dig underneath the trenches and trench fortifications that form part of this immense German fortress. Now, as you probably know, the Battle of Messines took 21 mines to be dug. In fact, there were plans for around 40, but the ground conditions were challenging. And in the sector that we're talking about here, we can see or examine a range of these mines laid beneath ground in the areas that formed the strong points in the German line. The German line was fearfully constructed. It was designed to break up any attack. It was designed to have mini fortifications within it so that any enemy attacking would be broken up into individual penny packets and picked up and destroyed. Now you can see where the citadel of our fortress, Dig Hill 80, picked out. And you can see also the front line of the German trenches here picked out by the blue dots. These dots, the location of some of those mines that were laid so carefully over 2 years of effort. So when it came to finally exploding those mines and surging forward, there were two divisions, the 16th Irish and the 36th Ulster. Both of them from two divides of the cultures in Ireland, both of them fighting together, brother with brother. Now the location of the Dig Hill 80, as you can see, was at the top high ground of this ridge. And in that ridge are a series of layers, and on those layers, or in those layers, are a variety of different conditions. And the British knew what they were doing. Norton Griffiths and his advisors made sure that the tunnels were dug into clay that would support their shape and would allow them to dig these tunnels carefully over 2 years of activity. It would mean that those, when exploded, would expel the Germans from the ridge top, would not only destroy their strong points, but also would batter the front line. As they said at the time, we may not change history, but we sure change geography. So when those explosions took place at 3:45, 7th of June 1917, it was hell on earth for those men who were experiencing it. For those men who observed it, for some seconds the air trembled and swayed. The guns and howitzers in their thousands spoke, and the infantry left their trenches and advanced behind the barrage. These kinds of mine warfare approaches had been taken before, but never in this manner and never in this coordinated means. The result was tragic for the defenders. And here we can see Helen Cole from Infantry Regiment 17, who describes the absolute death-defying aspects of this battle. At the 4th hour of the morning, a giant quake gripped the earth. 10 great fountains of earth, flanked by snake-like flames, came towering into the skies. Death was jumping amongst the dugouts. Those concrete fortifications were thrown into the air as if they were toys, landing back down onto the men below. And in those fortifications were also the fortifications within the citadel of Wytschaete. This had received its own special bombardment. Prior to the battle, on the 3rd of June, the earth was ripped asunder. The place was devastated. And so when the Irishmen who came around and took this fortress in the rear, all they found were the remains of the defenders and the crumpled heaps of the bricks. It's hardly surprising that the trench fortifications that have been described by Simon were reduced to this situation of absolute shell-blasted landscape, in which it seemed as if hardly a square foot of the enemy ground had escaped being hit by an enemy shell or trench mortar bomb. What we know now is the fury of the attack is recorded in the broken bricks and fragments that you yourselves have excavated alongside Simon and myself and Rob in this site. And it's recorded in that. It's also recorded in the stones of those cemeteries which display the brave deeds of these men, and indeed in the bones of the very men that you helped excavate in this amazing site. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Now Rob's going to tell us about the battle in 1918. Thanks, Rob.
Again, I had to decide what to talk about when we talk about 1918. And again, I've got 10 minutes. The story here is a relatively recent discovery, and to be honest, if I had known that story before, I would probably have called the project by a different name, not Dig 80, but the English Nest. But I'll tell you about that now. German Army communique on the 17th of April 1918 read, "On the blood-soaked soil of last year's Battle of Flanders, the army of General Sixt von Arnim took possession of Passchendaele and made further advances at Bakelea and Gelubelt. North of the Lys, in the early morning hours, the troops of General Sieger stormed the village of Wytschaete, slowing the enemy who offered heavy resistance from the heights north and east and west of the village before repelling heavy counterattacks. The operation was named Operation April Sun. Infantry Regiment 26, acting in conjunction with 17th Reserve Division, has been tasked to take the village of Wytschaete from the enemy," reads the first line of the German regimental account describing those battles in April 1918. To find out what happened in and around the village in the last year of the war, the day it was retaken by the German army, we cannot, as in the case of 1914 and 15, look at original army records, because unlike the Bavarian records, which survived in Munich, the records of the Prussian contingent of the German army were destroyed by one of the many air raids on Berlin in February 1945. What we have, though, are the German regimental histories published from the 1920s to the late 1930s. Over 500 of those were published in Germany after the war, and most of them as part of the semi-official series Die Erinnerungsblätter deutscher Regimenter, remembrance pages of German regiments. To create these, the publisher Hugo Stalling in Oldenburg was supported by the Reichsarchiv in Berlin, which gave access to and supplied the authors with original unit documents to base their accounts on. With the loss of most of the original records, these books are now the main source of information when we look at the battles in those late years of the war. In the case of the 26th Infantry Regiment, we have a massive 6-volume regimental history to work with, and about 30 pages are dedicated to the action at Wytschaete from 16th to 18th of April 1918. They include the action reports of all battalions involved, maps, critical post-action examinations, personal accounts, photographs, maps, everything you want, basically. Maybe just as a side note, I didn't envy Peter and Simon, who had to work with British war diaries, where the whole action from one of the units participating in that action over those 2 days has 13 lines. And most of those lines, looking from my perspective, are used to give the full names and decorations of the officers involved, while failing to tell us why there were 84 lethal casualties that day. So on the 16th of April at 6:25 a.m., the 26th Infantry Regiment from Magdeburg, broken up into 3 assault groups, approached Wytschaete from the southeast, following a rolling barrage of the German artillery. There had been no preparation of artillery fire, and those assault groups were spearheaded by detachments of stormtroopers of Sturm Battalion 7 and Sturm Company 17. By 7:15, so roughly 45 minutes later, the village was under German control. The defenders had been pushed out, falling back to the north, and by 8 a.m., the operational goals of the regiments had been reached. So a number of British counterattacks on the evening of the same day were repulsed, but soon afterwards the German units in the north and northwest of the village had expended their ammunition, and parts of the regiment were forced to fall back into a second defensive line within the village, and by doing so, a gap in the line opened. And there's a detailed account by an officer of the 26th Infantry which tells us what happened next. That was also published in the newspaper Magdeburg a day later. And he wrote, suddenly at about midnight, a report arrives at the regiment. The enemy has broken into the village somewhere to the north. Right at the gap where, according to 17th Reserve Division, the 152nd Infantry Regiment should have been. We are ordered to resolve the situation, yet it is impossible to pinpoint the precise boundaries of the enemy break-in in the darkness. Only in the early morning hours, with our lines having been re-established, the situation becomes clear. The enemy has broken in via the northwestern slope on the heights of Wytschaete and is now occupying bunkers, foundations and trenches southeast of the former Kapellerie in a gap 200 meters wide. So that is exactly where our 80 dig site is situated. A critical situation is this English position, which we have now designated as Das Engländernest, the English nest, is too close to our furthermost lines to be fired upon by artillery or mine throwers. During the night of the 17th to the 18th of April, 2 assault companies gather in front of the Engländernest in preparation for an attack. Yet this operation is a failure. Our men are too exhausted, while the enemy has the superiority in numbers and has also brought a number of machine guns into position. At 11 a.m. on the 18th of April, an English company is assembled for an attack within the Engländernest, southeast of the Kapellerie. In the furthermost line, Hauptmann Alka, who is observing the furthermost lines, and the regimental adjutant immediately realized the danger and opportunity and launched a small reconnaissance detachment, which only consists of 1 Vizefeldwebel and 12 men, into the attack. The enemy in the Engländernest takes flight, 48 prisoners are taken, and the trenches, concrete bunkers, and foundations reoccupied. Looking at the maps, as I said, we can be quite sure, we know that our site is directly in the center of that English breaking to the German lines. With the fall of Wytschaete, the road to Mount Kemmel was open. A week later, Mount Kemmel was in German hands. What the German army had been incapable of doing 4 years of war, they had done in 9 days. But I think it's time to look at some facts now.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah. So, now we see why this site is a motherlode, why it was such an excellent place for you to crowdfund and get involved in this dig, because it's a treasure trove. We've seen the full panoply of action, the to and fro at the front here. So, this brings us to our last 3 sections of this evening. Finds with Peter, the Soldiers' Archaeology with Simon, and then the Soldiers' Stories with Rob. So we'll start with Peter with finds.
Clicker failure again, excuse me a second. Thank you to my glamorous assistant. Everybody's favourite. Okay. I'm assuming it still works. So what I'm going to talk about is finds, but finds as defined as material culture. You'll have to forgive me while I take my glasses off. Right. Okay, that's good. Thank you. So, material culture, finds, objects, things that we find. I really want to talk to you about finds and their meaning. There's one thing that's important. It's the understanding of objects and the placing of those objects into their historic context. Because I can tell you one thing, objects that are taken outside of the context are almost meaningless in an archaeological sense. So what is material culture? Well, material culture is really all of those physical objects that help define a culture. And what we are talking about at Hill 80, of course, is a culture also defined by its context. A culture that is of war and of peace. So what we are looking at, what we found, what we excavated, what we carefully documented, what Simon and his team are working on now in its thousands. How many thousands, Simon? 3,000 objects so far. Each one of these carefully catalogued, carefully examined, carefully recorded, because without that, they're meaningless. So I want to pick up on some of the themes that Simon and Rob have talked about. Surprisingly and amazingly, the rural life of the miller, the miller's family, and the mill itself survived this tumultuous period. Can you imagine that wine glass survived 4 years of war? All of those shells bombarded down upon them. Whilst around them the pewter plates were bent by the shell activity, no doubt the miller took his wine, his cognac from that. I'm fairly sure that our Bavarian friends who occupied the miller's house would also have done that. We're talking about a signal, a record of the miller's house, of the miller's activity, of the miller's life in this, what was amazingly beautiful and rural atmosphere. But that was soon replaced by the soldiers who came, and we've heard from Rob ably about how those soldiers came in 1914, how they fought the most titanic of battles. The signal that we see from that immense signal from 1914. And with that signal comes the evidence of those boys that came from the hills of Bavaria, who fought for their fatherland, steadfast in loyalty to their König and to the Vaterland. I'm fairly sure that they would have taken that steadfast in loyalty seriously and would have celebrated the concept and have received postcards, hopeful postcards from home and sent them home. But we also know that these boys fell, just like Max Zor's fell at Wytschaete here in 1914, steadfast and loyal. What about the frontline life? We could pick out any one of the 3,000 objects and say, yeah, well, this tells us something of the life. I picked out a British object, a water bottle. Those water bottles indicate the need of the soldier to march and to survive, and water pivotal in that. But can you imagine what is happening to all of these discarded water bottles, lost water bottles on this landscape? It was pretty desert-like, if you recall, on that landscape with the sands around. And then we can see ones pierced by bullets, blown up by shells. If you were a British soldier, of course, trained to put your equipment together, can you imagine if you've lost your water bottle? Yes, you're going to be charged for that at some point. Let's hope most of those water bottles were lost rather than, obviously, reflecting casualties. We've heard a lot about the bombardment. You've seen multiple images of the bombardment of this village, of the drum fire, the Trommelfeuer. And we can see the mostly British shells that were rained down upon the Bavarian defenders. Shell after shell. You will have picked up or have seen those and seen our guys working across the site, ensuring that these things were made safe. The round after round of Mauser bullets, which had been picked up from that landscape. Each one of them testament to the battles to come and the battles they were enduring. Each one of them, as Rob has shown, testament to a completely devastated 1918 landscape where shell holes seem to coalesce together. Now, part of trench warfare is about understanding and maintaining your trench positions. You don't want to be raided by the other enemy. You don't want to have people breaking through. So keeping an eye on what's going requires you to illuminate the front. And this amazing survivor, a very pistol, firing a very cartridge, a cartridge which would illuminate the sky, made by Webley and Scott here in 1917, fired by nervous British subalterns into the night sky to observe and to illuminate the skies in between no man's land, to see and ensure that any attacker would be held back. Of course, the Germans did it a little bit differently. They had a searchlight with all of its paraphernalia and complexity, and that wonderful Zeiss optics that went with it to illuminate no man's land. No nervous subaltern here, but actually probably a confident lieutenant. So with all of the shell fire that is raining down onto these shells, all of the illuminated trenches, the possibility of trench raids, and the chance of death at any moment in these trenches, what would bring solace? Well, those boys from Bavaria came from a land that was devout Roman Catholicism, devout in Roman Catholicism. Here we have a set of rosary beads wrapped carefully that would present the chance for an individual to connect with his God, to ensure that there would be a protection for that soldier. And as we can see from this quote by Johann Birch of the 29th Bavarian Jäger Infantry Regiment, the only salvation for these men facing the shells as they came towards you, as those shell shards were raining down upon them, the only defense was prayer. And to protect carefully. A comrade always hangs a rosary next to the loophole. It's as close to him as a rifle. It's his protection, his salvation. So we've got lots of stories to tell, and most of these stories, all out in their context, give us the idea of what happened on this site. But questions remain. One enigma, the possession of one soldier, 2 British cap badges of the Royal Welsh Fusiliers, identical, wrapped in khaki cloth, wrapped with string. What are the stories? A soldier's souvenir, souvenirs taken in battle, or simply traded as a gift? These questions, we will continue to examine these questions. With your help, we will try to solve. Thank you.
It's Simon, ladies and gentlemen, to take this story a little further.
I'm going to talk a bit about a part that has been, we tried to conceal as, for a large part of the excavation. Today I'll show you some of the pictures of the remains that we found. Some of the pictures will be quite harsh. But again, I would like to ask you not to take any pictures of those pictures and put them online or anything, just out of respect of the soldiers that we excavated. The map of our site and locations of remains that we found. In total, we found soldiers' remains on 135 locations. But after analysis and puzzling and stuff like that, we ended up at about 110 soldiers. About 10 turned out to be animal remains, which were small parts, and we weren't sure. So Benny and her team decided it was animal, so we had to delete those. And on a few other locations, like those 4 green stars at the top, turned out to be just 2 soldiers and not 4 after the puzzling. So that's how we ended up at about 110, divided in 70 Germans, 9 Commonwealth soldiers or UK soldiers, 1 South African, 3 French soldiers, and then 27 unknown. The unknown soldiers is no nationality, because they were just bits and pieces. No equipment was done, so we couldn't make out what nationality they were from. And these guys will be buried as Belgian soldiers on the Belgian war graves. In Houthouse, there's an ossuary there, and they will just put with them because they're found on Belgian soil, and we don't know the nationality, so it's the responsibility of the Belgian army to take care of them. All the others will be taken care of Commonwealth War Grave Commission, the German Volksbund, or the French War Grave Commission. If you look at the location of the soldiers that we found, you can see with the red stars where we found those Germans, that you have three concentrations. Those were the mass graves. And then you can also see that there is a diagonal line from almost horizontal, actually. That's the 1914 trench. So almost all the German soldiers that we found are Bavarians, killed in those 2 weeks in 1914. If you look at the green stars, so the Commonwealth soldiers, you can also see that they are all on about one line that is about the same as the 1917-1918 trench. And as Rob and Peter already told, we think that there wasn't much action in 1917. There was not much fighting on our side itself. But most of the fighting happened in 1918, and that's why we think that most of the Commonwealth soldiers were killed in 1918, because they were on that breakthrough, they were the Englander nest, and they were on our side and killed them. I'll go into details a bit more about those guys from 1914, and then I'll go a bit into detail about the 1918 guys as well. So as I said, most of the 1914 guys were found in those three mass graves and in the trench. This is one of the mass graves that was later disturbed, and we couldn't, the soldiers were no longer in situ as three individual soldiers, but they were actually mixed together. But we found out that it was the grave of three soldiers. This is the first mass grave, which was found on the southern edge of the field. As you can see, the bodies were not placed very neat, they were just thrown in or dragged in. And it's not so visible on the photo here, but many of the soldiers had heavy injuries caused by blasts and explosions of artillery as well. And this is the bigger mass grave that was found next to the steam mill. These guys were buried a bit more in a proper manner, but still were facing all ways. Some of them were, one of them at least was lying on his belly, so face down. There was another guy lying on the feet of the soldiers, so it's still not a very clean burial. And as you can see, it looked like one big mass grave. There were two mass graves, in fact, next to each other. This is a 3D model, so you can see there's an opening in the middle. There's a small side on the left and a bigger one. And then the third part of the soldiers were found in the trenches. So this is the 1914 trench, and we're actually looking down at two Bavarian soldiers that were killed by artillery fire, just buried in the trench with all the kit. So we have everything from backpack to equipment and some of the personal belongings as well. Going to the 1918 actions, most of the soldiers from that period were Commonwealth soldiers. We found a few Germans that were definitely not Bavarian, and looking at the equipment, they were killed in the later phase of the war. So we also expect that it's most likely to be 1918, although we cannot exclude 1917 that they were killed during heavy bombardments then, and they were not able to bring them back, and they were just buried on the spot. But looking at equipment, they cannot be killed before 1960. Unfortunately, most of the Commonwealth soldiers were in a very bad condition. We only found limbs or pieces of the soldiers with very few equipment. So we were not able to identify any of, not even the regiments of the unit or the units of those soldiers. So we only know that they were British or Commonwealth based on their general equipment, but we couldn't go any closer. There was only one that was more or less complete. This was actually the first soldier that we found during the trial trenches, and the last one that went out on the end of the excavation. But again, we only know that it was British based on his equipment, but we couldn't find any ID or unit tags or insignia. Of course, we always question ourselves, who are they? When we find the soldiers, we first record them on site. We do as detailed recording as possible. After that, the work is divided in two parts. We have the anthropological part, which is done by the people from Cranfield, which I'm not going to go into details now. But what we do is we look at the finds that were found with the soldiers. A few examples here are the German stuff. So those things indicate for us that they are German and that they are Bavarian. So we have the Bavarian Latin plate from the Lederhelm. We have a part of the German uniform, again Bavarian with the lines, and what Peter already showed in Treuefest, belt buckle. Same thing happens with the British. We have a British bayonet still fixed on the muzzle of the Enfield rifle. We have a P14 ammo pouch, and the only insignia that we found was a South African. So that's the only one that we know was South African infantry. And again, that fits with the total story of 1918. So the South Africans were one of the units that were withdrawn from the scenes, part of the 9th Scottish Division. And they fought with the withdrawal in Wytschaete, but also with the counterattacks when they were in the composite battalion, and with all bits and pieces of units that were left back then. And to end, I'm going into detail with one or two of the soldiers. Again, those two guys that we found in that trench. The bottom left corner, you see one of those two. On the higher photo, it's the guy on the left. So he was killed by an explosion and crushed into the trench, as you can see in the position he's in. He's facing down. Had a lot of fractures because of the explosion. Very remarkable is that one of his bottles and his bowl survived the explosion. A lot of his equipment did. Very remarkable about those two is on the top you can see both of their watches, and on the bottom one of the ammo pouches. But all four of the ammo pouches, so two per soldier, were stamped within I don't know if it's very visible on this slide. There was some kind of an Ottoman stamp. The ammo pouches were all four of them were produced in the Ottoman Empire in 1911, and apparently it was a trade arrangement between Bavaria and the Ottoman Empire. So those guys most likely know each other because a lot of their stuff fitted together. And the most remarkable thing is, it's not really visible on the photo, but both of the watches stopped at 5 to 11. So those guys probably were killed at the same bombardment, at the same time, and in the same fight. And now I will let Rob talk about even more detailed personal stories. Thank you.
I might get a bit emotional here. I'll try not to. One of my best platoon leaders, the Unteroffizier Bruchsal, has been commandeered to take photographs. He has been tasked to take photographs of all known cemeteries, comrades and field graves in the divisional sector. These will be sent to the families of the fallen and also archived in conjunction with maps to simplify later reinterment of those fallen comrades. All that makes sense, as there are graves here everywhere, and many are lost in shelter. The men don't fear death anymore. We have made our peace with the thought of our own demise. A much heavier burden is the fear to be forgotten in foreign soil, an inglorious end for any soldier, swallowed up by the earth, a long way from home, without a sign of remembrance, separated from one's comrades and the bereaved in the Heimat, being forgotten. Such a fate no one wishes for. In answer to your letter, I can tell you that although I have been with your son on the 29th of September 1918, I was myself positioned on the other flank of the company. Your son was on the far left, which made it difficult for me to see what was going on there. Nevertheless, I can assure you that he was killed instantly. I swear to you that he had only been, if he had only been wounded, we would have taken him back with us. In 4 years of war, we have never left one of our own behind. I'm incredibly sorry that we could not bury him. I'm sure the French did, though, and I'm confident that they will have recorded the location somewhere to be able to give him a Christian burial later on. No soldier wants to be forgotten. That applies to friend and foe alike. With our work, or your work, on Hill 80 or Höhe 80, we were able to save the mortal remains of 110 soldiers of the Great War from destruction. Due to your help and support, they will get a burial in consecrated ground next to their comrades. They will rest in places where people can go to remember them. They will not be forgotten. Albert Oerle will be laid to rest with his name returned to him. Albert was born on the 1st of March 1897 in the little village of Buch near Nuremberg, as son of Albert Christian and Maria Oerle. The military records tell us that he was working as a gardener in Nuremberg. The honor book of the city, published in 1922, lists him as a glass grinder apprentice. Only 3 days after the German mobilization on 1st of August 1914, Albert, like so many other young men, volunteered to fight for King and Vaterland, König und Vaterland, King of Fatherland. He didn't have any prior military service. On the 7th of August, an army clerk recorded a physical description. He was 5'7" tall and of slim build. He had a round chin with a wisp of a beard, a pointed nose with a scar on it, a straight mouth, and another small scar in the corner of his left eye. After a brief training period, he was transferred to his regiment, the 21st Reserve Infantry Regiment, where he joined 10th Company. On 20th of October, he would have been issued with his iron ration, and he would have packed his backpack, and his remaining private property, not needed for war service, would have been packed and sent with a separate parcel to his parents at home. Finally, on the night of the same day, live rifle ammunition was distributed. On the 22nd of October, his regiment transferred to the front in a number of trains. After a journey of 65 hours, Albert, like the rest of his regiment, disembarked at Lille. On the 25th of October, the regiment marched towards Ypres, finally arriving east of the village on All Saints' Night, 31st October 1914. Launched into battle, Albert would have seen action in and around the village on 1st and 2nd November. On 3rd of November, 3rd Battalion occupied defensive positions west of the Kapellerie Mill on the northern slope of Wytschaete Heights. And on this day, Albert disappeared. We don't know what happened to him. Was he killed by French rifle fire or an artillery shell? Was his body buried by the impact, or was it covered by snowfall which set in during the night of the 3rd? We don't know. The company clerk recorded him missing on that day. He was declared dead in 1917. Albert carried a dog tag, an early dog tag, which carries information about division and regiment and a personnel number. No name, no personal details, and we were exceedingly lucky that the list of the 1914 dock tags of the 21st Reserve Infantry Regiment survived, so we could decode all Alberts. That was the key to his identification. He was 17 years old when he died. Georg Pielhofer will not be forgotten. In one of the mass graves on the site, we found a dog tag of Georg Pielhofer. Georg's story mirrors the confusion and chaos of those early battles of 1914 we talked about earlier. Serving in the same company as Albert, the two would probably have known one another, almost certainly known one another. According to the records, he was lightly wounded at the head on the 3rd and sent to a field dressing station. In June 1915, he was registered as missing. An official inquiry came to the conclusion that no field hospital had ever seen him, and his dog tag hasn't been sent in either. He was 24 years old and he was declared dead in 1922. We cannot tell for sure if Georg's body is in the comrade's grave, but we found the dog tag, and there's a man who matches Georg's age, but he's likely too tall to match his physical description. And there's a man who matches Georg's size, but his age doesn't seem to match. So that work is still in progress. But nevertheless, Georg Pielhofer will not be forgotten. Concerning the German fallen, there are some clues we have which might lead, or possibly will lead, to identification of more barbarian German soldiers. And I can't go into detail here, but for that we will probably ask for your help on the virtual dig group in the next week or so. We'll post something and then every one of you can help to identify 2, possibly 3, possibly 3 other soldiers. I can't tell you too much about it, but I'll put something on the Facebook virtual dig group, and I would be delighted if you'd have a close look. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. So, don't know how I've done that. So now we've got a few minutes for some questions, if anyone has any questions. And how we're going to do this is there's a microphone at the back on a stand. So if you go to the mic and speak into the stand, or in fact, we can pass the handheld around. I'm happy to run around with a handheld. So do we have any questions? Anyone at all? I'll yeah. He's just turning it up, so give him a second. Here you go.
I would like to
hang on, wait. Thumbs up from the desk.
I would like to know what is the significance of the blue poppy?
That one.
The blue poppy.
That is in Germany. We don't. Well, in German commemorative culture. Hello. Doesn't work. It does work. In German commemorative culture, we don't use the red poppy. We use the forget-me-not. So
The
that
forget-me-not.
That is the forget-me-not.
I see.
Before 1945, we used the blue cornflower, like the French did.
Cornflower.
Right. Thanks, Rob. Any more? The fellow there, gentleman there.
I was wondering if we keep hearing about the identification of all the boys. I was wondering if we had an identification for the actual miller that we keep hearing about.
Identification for the...
Of the miller? We keep hearing the miller's house. The miller's this, the miller's that.
Oh, right.
Do we know who he was?
That's a good question. Do we know who the miller was? They're working.
Did you work? Okay. Yes, we know. His name was Castell, and his grandson still lives next to the dig site. So the nice painting that Peter used actually hangs in the living room of his grandson. So we visited him, and actually the grandson, people that were at the dig site probably met him because he was at the site every day. And we gifted him one of the grey stones from the steam mill as a remembrance of the site, because he heard a lot of stories about about his grandfather and the mill, but he never knew the mill because after the war, his grandmother, because his grandfather died during the war, his grandmother left and they rebuilt next to the site because the destruction was too big, which was for us a gift because now we could excavate it, and he left it untouched as some kind of remembrance, and he was very moved now and then by the stuff that we found.
Excellent. Another question? Of course, all the way over there. I'll go to this fella first and then we'll come back over to you, sir. Where were you?
Hello. My question was, what was the relationship between the physical finds and the stories that people had? Did the stories of local people survive? I mean, you mentioned the miller, but did people know what was there? Did they care? Was there a relationship between the stories and what you found?
Thank you.
One of the biggest stories, some kind of a legend that was told in the village, is that there was an army or a regiment buried on the field. So that is in fact true. Or somehow there's how you say a core of truth in that. The stories that I've heard from the miller's grandson is just a massive destruction, that the devastation and that the site was so badly cut up by artillery fire that they couldn't do anything with it anymore. And it's not visible on the stuff that we showed today, but most of the see it either because we fill it up with the topsoil. But next to the excavation site, there's also about 3 to 4 meters lower than the excavation site. And until the war, it was about the same height. But the family of the miller only came back in, I think, spring 1919 or maybe even 1920. And when they came back, people were stealing the ground. So they started to win the clay and dug up the clay next to it. So that's the reason why part of that field is lower than the rest.
Another question? Right, and you're going to be on the live stream, sir. The excitement.
Okay. Yeah, for both the German and Allied soldiers, do you know yet where they will be buried?
Thank you.
But the German soldiers will be buried at the Lange Mark Cemetery next year on the 11th of October. Yeah, they'll be reinterred.
I inquired with the Commonwealth Wargrave Commission, and I asked them to rebuild a week. Where they will be buried, I don't know yet, but it's most common habit is that they will be buried very close to where they were found. So if there's if there are cemetery, they probably end up there. But they will try to do it in the same week. So if people want to visit one burial, they can also visit the other one, so that they don't have to make 2 travels. So I'll keep you guys.
Any more questions? Okay. Gentleman down the front here.
Thank you. So, hello? All right. So, as we mentioned a little bit towards the beginning of the meeting here, the fact that this was crowdfunded is rather incredible. The fact that it didn't have to go through a university or any sort of grant funding body of some sort. So going forward, for any of you, how do you see this sort of thing happening again? Do you think that there is a great hope that we will have many more similar excavations and historical projects based not on some official funding source, but based off of things like this, crowdfunding?
Thanks.
Well, I think obviously this was unique. It was first of its kind and it was incredibly successful. We're talking about an excavation of this scale funded by the individual donations of people like yourselves. And that took a huge amount of work and engagement, and the behind the scenes activity that went with that, and Dan at the back there assisting us with this. So it's not something to be taken lightly, but it is a way forward. It is groundbreaking, and I know that Simon, for example, has been discussing this with our archaeological colleagues. It's important to emphasize that when we set out to do this, we set out to do it with the strictest and strongest possible academic basis, that it would be done scientifically, it would be done according to moral and ethical dimensions, and we would hope that this is a line in the sand, an event horizon for people to follow, to build upon or engage with. And I think maybe yes, so long as the will is there and the activity is there. And it's important again to emphasize that this dig was a rescue dig. It was a dig that would have, without this dig, those remains would not have been excavated to this quality, and would probably, much of this would have been lost. So we have to think about the opportunity, but certainly when such opportunities arraign themselves, I'm sure there will be people like ourselves willing to step up to carry this work forward and to do it to the same standard.
Thanks. One more, I think. And I'm going to go straight down the middle. Gentleman here.
Well, forgive my ignorance, and maybe I should know this, but has the archaeological work on Hill 80 now concluded, and what is the future of the site?
Thanks.
On site, the work has indeed concluded. I've been there about a month ago, and they already started construction. So sewage pipes are going in, or are already in by now as we speak. I think by the end of the year, the road will be there. And then they'll try to sell all the parcels, the lots, and then the houses will come. But on the site, there's nothing left. But we can, we're 99% sure that we got everything out. We might have forgotten a few bullets or stuff, but there will be no trenches and no bodies left. That we can assure.
Thank you. Well, I think we've reached the end of our session. There you are. Say hello to everyone on the live stream.
Hey, Carla.
Absolutely. I just want to say an enormous thank you to Rob, to Simon, to Peter for putting this evening on so that you could see the fruits of your labours, your contribution, your efforts, and the stuff that they've been able to bring about because of you. I think if you didn't have a grip on the sheer scale of the battle at Hill 80 across the 4 years of the First World War, before you arrived, you certainly do now. And you can see what a hotly contested place it was, and why it was in fact such an excellent site from a historical perspective, but also from the perspective of making sure that the men on that site will now rest amongst their comrades is an incredibly important thing, particularly in this centenary year. To have achieved something like that, and to have been part of achieving something like that, is really very, very special. And not just, although we have talked about how the important academic aspect of this, not just an academic thing. In fact, when people say to you that, when people use the word academic to make it sound dry, to make something sound dispassionate, to make something sound perhaps not particularly interesting or important, I think this project has demonstrated exactly how important academic things can be. Because what we've done here, what you've done here, is brought these men to rest at Hill 80 and Wytschaete. So I want to thank Rob for involving me in this project for a start. It's a very special thing to be involved in, and I want to thank you for being involved in this project as well. So thanks again. We'll be mingling on our way out, so if you need to collar anyone or find anything out, or if there's anything you missed, I'm sure the panel will be able to help. There's also, I think the bar's still open for another 10 minutes, so fill your boots. I certainly need a drink after some of that. Thanks again. Big thanks to Dan Snow for not coming. And because otherwise he'd have done all this yap. You've been brilliant. You've been an important part of a fantastic project. Thanks again, and thanks for joining us this evening. Good night. Thanks. Oh no, the bar's closed.